Hello and welcome back to ATARC's webinar series. Today, topic experts will share strategies that agencies can implement to alleviate the concern of the unknown and make operations more efficient. My name is Kirsten Patton, and I'll be moderating today's panel. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. We are an organization that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. I would like to welcome all of our attendees and a special thank you to Lisa Ragusa-Fidela and the entire Aqua security team. This afternoon, we are going to hear from each of our panelists. We'll also have time for some Q&A. And I want to let the audience know that if you answer all three of our poll questions, then you'll be able to receive CPE credits for today's events. So now with all of that being said, I'd love to start with a round of introductions from each of our panelists. So if we could go around and share with us who you are, what your role is at your agency or organization, and anything else that you'd like to share with our audience, now would be the time. Paul, can we start with you, please?
Absolutely. Great to be here. Thanks, to ATARC for the invite. I'm Paul Blahos. I'm currently the CISO at the Department of Labor. Had that role since 2018. Hard to believe it's been that long, but that's what it is. 30 plus years in IT. I sometimes hate to admit that. And about 25 in cyber. Had to do the math this morning to figure that out. Now, in that time, I've done A to Z in IT and cyber. But at this point in my career, I'm really mission focused now, maybe more so than cyber focused, frankly. What do I mean by that? I mean, you don't want me reverse engineering malware anymore. You don't want me running pen tests. These would be a disaster. But what it also means is, I'm always thinking about how can IT and cyber help accomplish mission? And, what is the DOL mission? Well, our mission involves fostering, promoting and developing the welfare of job seekers, wage earners, retirees, improving working conditions, assuring work-related benefits and rights. And one of our core beliefs is that come from these is that good jobs change lives. So I have to focus on really how does IT and more specifically cyber support those mission goals and goals. Now, whether the DOL team are enabling pathways to good jobs or expanding equitable opportunities, or empowering and protecting workers and their families, these take IT systems and services and data. And the people, whether they're DOL staff or the public, they're using and depending on these systems. And they expect, and frankly have a right to expect, that the systems and services will be available when needed, they'll produce accurate results, and that we'll keep safe and confidential any data they provide. So I need to make sure these qualities are baked in to IT at the Department of Labor, and this is where my team in cyber comes in. If you want to know more about DOL and IT there, we have a LinkedIn page and we have blog posts at blog.dol.gov. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go to Jennifer next.
Good afternoon to all. Thank you for having me here. My name is Jennifer Franks, and I serve as the director for the Center for Enhanced Cybersecurity at GAO within its Information Technology and Cybersecurity team. I've been at GAO now for 18 years, so it's flown by. Similar to Paul, I did start off more in an IT area, but my background was cyber, my education was in cyber, and I primarily have led a cyber-related career while at GAO. My current portfolio serves two purposes for the agency: mission forward in facing with Congress to help American citizens get results and answers from federal agencies about how we are being great stewards of the American taxpayer dollar. So my teams go in and we look at the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information systems and the data that resides in those systems, protecting sensitive data, emerging technologies and the risk to those technologies and sorts. I cover financial management, federal cybersecurity efforts, FISMA, healthcare cyber, all of the things. I also then help internally with the cybersecurity controls of our internal agencies' needs. So I have a depth and breadth of cybersecurity specialists that work on both sides of the house. So I'm happy to be with you guys today and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. And Bo, let's hear from you next.
Hey, happy to be here. Been here at the census since 2019. So Paul, you got me beat a little bit on that front. But first role in what we call the statistical community of the federal government. Our mission is to be the nation's leading provider of information for our people and our businesses. And we work closely with Department of Labor, specifically the Bureau of Labor Statistics over there, and a lot of collaboration within the statistical community. And like Paul was saying, and Jennifer, we take the public's trust in us very, very seriously, because that's really our currency. If we don't have trust, we're out of business. And so our authority comes from Title 13 US Code, and Title 13 has a specific confidentiality requirement there. So it's a legal obligation that we have as well. So we take that seriously. Before census, I was at the Small Business Administration for several years, and I got to work directly with the small business community, which is also, I think, a very noble endeavor. They are very impacted by cybersecurity risks, as we all know, similar to healthcare. And I know Tom's probably going to address that. Healthcare is also dealing with that very seriously too. So happy to have this conversation. I do think that the paradigm shift in cybersecurity is helpful and beneficial. And so hopefully we can talk about a lot of that today.
Thank you. And Tom, good to see you again.
Good to see you as well, Chris. Thank you so much for inviting me today. I am Tom Harrell, and I am a government contractor serving as a senior GRC policy analyst and advisor within the Office of Administrative Management and the Information Technology Resources branch. I'm currently working on or exploring the viability of constructing a governance architecture that feeds into cybersecurity that will help us deliver more treatments to all patients more quickly. Comments today are my own and not reflective of U.S. government policy. Thank you.
Thank you. And Yusuf.
I love that disclaimer, Tom. So first, thank you for having me, and thank you for my fellow panelists for their service. As a former federal employee, I know what it takes. So thank you for everything that you do. So I am a Director of Global GRC, Governance, Risk Management, and Compliance at Aqua Security. Aqua is a cloud-native application protection platform. I started my professional career as an elementary school teacher, then joined the government before leaving to the private sector. My educational background is in cybersecurity. I'm completing a PhD in artificial intelligence as we speak. So looking forward to adding artificial intelligence to every answer I provide today. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Very cool. Thank you for being here. All right, so we've got quite a few questions to go through. We may or may not get to them all, and we don't necessarily need to go in any particular order. So if you feel inclined to respond, just go ahead and throw the raise hand icon up to notify me that you want to speak on this. But otherwise, if we could, Paul, if you don't mind kicking us off, I'd love to start with our first question, which is, considering the evolving nature of cyber threats, what adaptive strategies should be implemented to safeguard U.S. government infrastructures against the latest forms of cyber attacks?
Well, thanks for the first question. Appreciate that. When I was thinking about this question, and I coincidentally, Verizon's data breach investigation report, the most recent one, came out the other day, and I'm gonna offer sort of the counterpoint to this. In their report, they said it's the old stuff that you need to worry about. All this new threats and things, yeah, they're out there, but we still need to be focused as well on some of the traditional threats, whether it's user awareness that we need, because phishing is still one of the biggest ways that the attacker will use to get into our networks, or believe it or not, unpatched and misconfigured systems are some of the biggest ways that we also get compromised. So I know we're trying to, what's the new thing that we need to protect ourselves against, and myself, I'm sure the others will touch on some of those. But I have a healthy level of appreciation for our adversaries. Our adversaries will always use what works for them. They're not going to say, well, I only want to use something new. They're going to say, what's the easiest way for me to compromise that organization, that agency, or that individual? So that idea that, to me, it's that we have to protect across the spectrum. I'm sure you've all heard this, that the attacker only needs to be right once and we need to be right every time. But we need to protect across that spectrum. So we need to protect against the old stuff and the newer stuff. Now, as far as newer stuff goes, the thing that I'm seeing that, especially for our more sophisticated adversaries, is in the supply chain, because they have found that while we may be doing a great job either protecting our environments, from attack, you look at our supply chain and there may be weaknesses there. I think the adversaries are also saying, gee, I can compromise one and through one get to many. Again, these adversaries in a lot of cases are very smart, they're resourced, and they're going to go after what works. So I'm not sure I even answered the question, but those were some of my thoughts on that, we do need ways to protect against the newer things. I'll throw out AI is the new buzzword you said, but I'll throw out the one that was 3 years ago. Everything was zero trust. You have to put zero trust in. So zero trust is a great way, a great solution to acknowledge that we're going to have problems. Because what zero trust does is hopefully detect them quicker and isolate them quicker. It doesn't prevent stuff necessarily, but it detects and isolates, and that's probably where we need to put a lot of effort into that type of thought that we've already been compromised and we need to do something to make sure it's as small a compromise as possible. And also worry about supply chain. Thank you.
Thank you for kicking us off there. Yusuf, I see your hand up.
Yeah, no, I wanted to add something to what Paul just mentioned about taking care of or addressing old vulnerabilities. One of the things that I am guilty of, and I know a lot of security professionals are as well, is focusing on addressing high and moderate vulnerabilities, right? Those that are normally harder to exploit, but because there's a CVSS score of 7.0 or higher, so that's what we address first. And we neglect to look at a list like the one that CISA put together of known exploited vulnerabilities, their catalog. Putting together, 5 or 6 or 10 low vulnerabilities would make a system much more vulnerable to an attack than a one high vulnerability or 2 high vulnerabilities. But taking a step back, so and Paul mentioned this earlier, and I couldn't say it any better. Education, right? Educating our workforce. Cybersecurity 3 years ago is not cybersecurity today. It's not cybersecurity 5 years ago. New technologies require training, require end user education, continued education, and bad guys are only getting better, right? Getting more sophisticated, or in some cases they're just using simpler method that you wouldn't even think they would use. So education and end user training is a big key to protect against threats in general and emergent threats in particular.
Thank you for sharing. Bo, go ahead.
So I'll just talk about it, and I agree with Paul and Yusuf, but I'll talk about it from a conceptual standpoint. At a high level, CISOs think about protection in 2 sort of domains. One is kind of the traditional defense in depth model. I think most people are familiar with that. That's really where the cyber hygiene is, configuration, patching, so on and so forth. It's like do everything to keep your house in order. But the other domain is really the game changer, and that's where today's topic is really handy. So how do you infuse intelligence into your processes so that you're able to prioritize? And what Yusuf was talking about with the CISA known exploitable vulnerabilities, that's great intel, right? These are the vulnerabilities that the bad guys are actively exploiting. Those better get to the top of your stack, when you're dealing with your vulnerabilities, right? So at Census, we have a team of cyber threat intelligence analysts, and they focus on the threat domain. What's happening out there? Who's doing what to who? Why are they doing it? What are their motivations? And then most importantly, how are they doing it? And then that information drives so many processes within the Census Bureau. We have a pen test team that can take that information and simulate that that activity to ensure that we can detect it, first of all, and that we're resilient against it as well. We have threat hunters that scour the internal network for any telltale signs of attempts or successes related to those specific attacks and that intel. And of course, our Security Operations Center is on the lookout 24/7, and they're using that intel to make sure that we are shields up against specific attacks, right? And we can even infuse that into our training and awareness program so that when there is a new phishing technique coming in, we can work that into our monthly phishing exercises so that users are seeing real world type attacks. And so it's critical to infuse, defense in depth and intelligence driven cybersecurity or threat-based cybersecurity. You got to account for that threat domain in your operational processes.
Thank you. And Tom?
Thank you. I totally agree with my colleagues. I believe we must become intelligence-led organizations. And cyber is not just an IT issue, it is really an organizational issue. And I think that we have to start to leverage open source and dark web intelligence sources to really understand existing and emerging threats. One of the neat resources that the government has right now is Scout Prime, which is a shared service by CISA that helps you see what others are looking at in your organization. And this sort of helps you fine-tune your security posture. And you also have to adopt an enterprise risk management mindset to understand your business risks, your technical risks, and also to track those malicious tools, attacker trends, and targeting life exchange information about techniques and targets where they recruit partners. So that's sort of where I see things going right now.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective. And Jennifer, you're welcome to weigh in on that, but I'd also love to start with you on the next question, if that's okay.
Absolutely. I'll take the next question.
Sure. So in the context of continuously evolving cyber threats, what advanced policies and proactive strategies are crucial for the robust protection of U.S. government infrastructures?
Okay, so I love this question, and thinking about what everyone shared in the context of the last question, I agree with everything that was shared, from strategizing to noting that just 3 years ago, the biggest buzzword across federal government in all industries really was zero trust. And we're still actively deploying and implementing the initiatives of ZTA across our various environments. But now we have AI, right? But we cannot still forget the defense in depth and the basic cyber hygiene strategies. We can't negate having to upskill our workforce, because cyber as it was will no longer be what it is. And then going forward, we have to redesign and strengthen where it is we need to go so that we can stay ahead of the vulnerability curve. So thinking about all of those types of things and really thinking about how to protect the government infrastructures, policies and procedures and strategies are going to have to be implemented. And when you think about the NIST cybersecurity framework, there are now 6 categories within that framework. With the revision that came out in February, we're starting at govern and ending at recover. But the two areas that we really need to hone into now are the protect and detect families. Because as my colleagues here, discussed beforehand, it's not just enough to really implement certain controls. We have to be able to implement them and then tailor risk appropriate compensating controls across our various environments. And all of us have different complex missions in our various organizations. We all have critical business needs, and we have to be proactive within our strategies to be able to tailor the necessary controls to be able to respond and detect from these various threats that are emerging across the globe. There's sensitivities of our systems. We have all the technologies and the tools that we need to be have implemented in our various systems, but they're all critically vulnerable to these cascading evolutions of threats. So again, we were looking at what Tom even just said with an agency-wide, enterprise-wide approach of really resetting what's, expected of us in protecting our infrastructure. It's not just going to be the IT and cybersecurity specialists at your organizations that are going to have to be good stewards. You're going to have to really re-strategize how we educate all the users who have anything to do with touching a keyboard in our organizations on their role and responsibility in helping us to kind of just be a little bit more robust in our protections of our infrastructures.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer, and she answered it wonderfully. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment on that one before I call for our first poll question? Paul, go ahead.
All right, David, I think great contributions there from Jennifer. A couple things I want to pull some threads and also maybe bring up some new things in that area. And I think a lot of this, really, the crux of it is that none of us have unlimited budgets. Right? If I had unlimited budgets, I guess I could do everything, but I have an unlimited budget, so I need to prioritize. So what can help me prioritize, I think, is something that would be a proactive strategy or policy. And Yusuf, I think it was you mentioned the CISA KEV. I love that as something to help prioritize, because prior to that, it was like, hey, look at everything and try to fix everything at the same time. And it was harder to get your budget head around that. Like, where do I put my resources to do this? I also appreciate other things CISA is doing where they are offering some types of shared service to do things, whether it's their pen testing that they do through the FAST program or the CDM program. They have to provide some tooling to people. These are very, very beneficial when you have limited resources. Right? Can I leverage something that's in some ways a shared resource across government? And then to kind of stick with the sharing aspect, bad guys share stuff, and so us good guys need to share stuff too. I think Bo mentioned this before about having threat intel feeds, and not only do we need feeds, but we need to contribute to that too, right? Here's what I'm seeing, here's what you're seeing. We need to have communications across paths of communications across both our other federal partners and our private sector partners, and saying, hey, we're all in this together. How do we communicate? And I know CISA has some efforts, and the federal government in critical infrastructure space has efforts there too to try to encourage this data sharing. And the last thing, just about workforce, I think that can cut across all the questions today. If you guys are like me in the federal space, I'm worried about workforce. I'm worried about the workforce I have being retained. I'm worried about the workforce I have keeping up with the training that they need to understand and react to these emerging threats and newer things, whether it's like, hey, now you need to, we've got people who grew up on Castle and Moat, right? And sometimes it's hard for them to shift gears and understand how zero trust is going to do something. And we use the other buzzword. Some of them are like, well, how does AI impact what I do, right? And I think we need to make sure that we're keeping these good people, allowing them to get training that they need to understand these new ways of doing things. so that we continue to have a robust workforce.
Excellent point. Thank you. And Tom, you want to go next?
Sure. I would just like to add, I mean, I agree with everything there. But one of the other, I think, practice strategies we should have is really instituting a robust third-party risk assessment policy for supply chain security and open source software security. And patching. And this is a bugaboo of mine because we need to make sure everything is patched. This is not a new thing we should be doing. It's something we should always have been doing, keeping everything patched. Knowledge of your attackers' tactics, techniques, procedures, those are important on the cyber side. But also understanding there's this new thing which I heard about while I was in Tel Aviv for cyber tech, data poisoning. I have always been very concerned about, the integrity of our data as it flows through the organization. So that's another thing that I think we should keep in mind because it's something that really is concerning, especially in the healthcare space.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And Yusuf, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'll keep it short. My fellow panelists here touched on almost everything I wanted to cover, but I won't touch on policies that need to be in place. NIST already has guidance. Agencies can add or remove policies as they see fit. But one important component here is how often are we testing these policies and making updates to reflect and address current threats, right? Is our policy from 2019, 2018? That's probably no longer relevant. So testing these policies, updating them as often as possible. And testing is very important when it comes to plans, incident response plan. We have one on paper. Are we just doing the once a year test that's required to meet, certain controls, or are we testing these incident response plans on a monthly basis, quarterly basis? Getting folks used to running incident drills is very important. It helps not only build that muscle memory, but it helps them uncover things that they didn't initially think about as they're going through these exercises. The other thing I wanted to talk about is automation. Paul mentioned this, we just don't have enough workforce. So automating as much as possible to ensure these policies are met will help free up some human resources. And the last thing, and Paul also touched on this, is collaboration. Agencies with other agencies, with teams within the same agency, and obviously the private sector is key. We're all in this together. It is, for lack of a better word, a battle. So we have to get together and make sure that we're all on the same page fighting, that cyber enemy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your perspectives. I'm going to call for our first poll question for the audience. So that'll be up here on the screen shortly. And it's, how well informed do you feel about the current threat landscape facing U.S. government infrastructure? So please take a moment to respond to that. And then as for our panelists, Bo, if you don't mind starting us off with our next question here. How should U.S. agencies adapt their defensive strategies to effectively counter the unique challenges posed by APTs, advanced persistent threats?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I think that, we talked about zero trust before. I believe zero trust offers a tremendous paradigm shift in cybersecurity. I mentioned that before in my intro, and I'll kind of dig into that a little bit to demonstrate why I think that is and how that really unlocks the potential to deal with these unique challenges. Again, the starting point for anything technology is that technology is always insecure. There's vulnerabilities we know about, and there's vulnerabilities we don't know about, and there's always vulnerabilities, right? So even if you're fully patched, you're still vulnerable. And so there is no panacea when it comes to, there is no such thing as perfect protection, right? And so what zero trust offers is the ability to leverage a whole plethora of attributes, and some of the attributes relate to the identity of the individual. And under zero trust, identity also extends to the device, right? So identity for the individual attributes, and there's several there you can choose from, right? It's build your own risk profile, several attributes related to the device that user is using, and then also attributes related to the session, which is something like geographic location. Where do we expect this user to attempt to connect from? And so you're able to create a policy that uses as many of those attributes as you need to make it very, very difficult for someone to insert themselves into that communication or impersonate that individual in an attack, right? Because maybe you steal the account, and maybe you figure out a way to do multi-factor with that account by stealing the code or the text message or the email or something like that. That's very sophisticated. But do you have that individual's device? Probably not, right? So by including the person's account attributes and the device attributes, and again, there's many others you can choose from, you can really, really raise the bar on the adversary, right? Raise the cost of the attack, which is what it's all about. And so zero trust, it sounds like it's a very stern, rigid concept if you don't get into the details. Once you get into it, it's endlessly flexible, right? Which really makes it easy for us to shape it according to mission needs. Like Paul was saying, all CISOs these days must be concerned with mission. And if that's not a primary concern, it's an equal concern to cyber. It's very critical. And so zero trust allows us to have that flexibility, whereas a perimeter model simply doesn't. And something like microsegmentation, right? The network guys know how to microsegment, right? They carve up the network according to IPs and MAC addresses. Under zero trust, microsegmentation is completely different because you use things like identity, right? So you got to have the right IP, you got to have the right MAC address, and you got to be the right person, and you got to have the right device, right? So you really leverage those additional attributes under zero trust, which aren't available to you under a traditional model.
Thank you. Jennifer, please go ahead.
So I like Bo's answers. I'm going to stay on some of the topics that he kind of highlighted there, because it is a very important topic, zero trust that is, and helping us to really implement ZTA across our organizations will really put us a little bit ahead of where we could be in protecting our various infrastructures, especially when it comes to the advanced persistent threats. And, at the end of this fiscal year 2024, we have very aggressive timelines in really striving to complete some of the requirements of ZTA. But I even hesitate to say complete because there is no completion date, because it is going to be a continual process of implementing new strategies into your environment to strengthen your perimeter security efforts. So when you're thinking about what's going to be helpful, as Bo eloquently laid out, network segmentation is also going to be critical in this capacity, because it's not going to be an if, it's going to be a when. Vulnerabilities are going to continue, data breaches, incidents alike are going to happen. But what zero trust is going to allow us to do is going to allow us to figure out where those anomalous behaviors are happening, where those malicious actors are perhaps coming into our environments. And before they begin to pivot and laterally move somewhere, we're going to be able to segment out that disruptive traffic and the other parts of the network. The other users in our organization may not even be disrupted, may not even really know what's going on, because we're able to quarantine this one situation and remediate it a little bit swifter. Also, when thinking about the network segmentation piece and thinking about ZTA in that context, continuous monitoring is also going to be a huge aspect of thinking about ZTA. And we talked a little bit earlier about the threat hunting and threat detection. All of these combined are really going to help us to be better for stewards and ahead of the curve. I keep talking about, with being prepared for the next set of vulnerabilities. Incidents are going to take place, but if we continue to have the monitoring capabilities in place to track for the event logging requirements and the capabilities across our organizations and be able to detect some of those anomalies that are happening, we will be able to really move forward with some of the requirements that have been set forth by the guidance, and then consider how to prioritize other computing strategies that we need to implement and budget along the lines.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Paul, go ahead.
I'm gonna be real quick here because I see other people want to comment too. But looking at this one in reverse, like what defensive strategies don't work against APTs? And I think we have to look no further back than solar winds and find out there was the classic example of how traditional castle moat or whatever type of security you want to talk about is no longer effective and cannot work. There were so many lessons learned from that. But I mean, let's face it, the adversary was in federal networks for what, 6-8 months before it was really noticed. Like that's the definition of an APT, right? They're there, they're advanced, they're persistent in there. The old way of doing security didn't work, and zero trust, frankly, is very much designed to detect, prevent, mitigate, isolate that exact type of thing. And just echo what Bo and Jennifer said. The defensive strategy has to be to get to zero trust. I mean, the different threat vectors, whether it's supply chain or phishing, both try to result in the adversary getting essentially an insider way of exploiting your network. So zero trust is designed to say there are no insiders. I've got to reestablish trust. Thanks.
Thank you. And Tom, go ahead.
Okay, I'll be very quick. One of the concerns I have also when it comes to APTs are IoT devices. And the lack of attention given to these devices when you first get them. Today, we have smart homes and we have all of these things that we talk to in our house. And when I'm like right now, I'm at home doing this webinar. And I mean, I have no IoT devices, okay, because I know sometimes they listen to you. And if I'm discussing things that are work related and security related, and a device is listening, that opens up exposure to the inside of our environment, okay? But also when in healthcare, and not NIH healthcare, but healthcare in general, when you have medical devices coming in, they have to learn to change the credentials. That is super important because you don't know who's listening. And that is an easy way for data to get poisoned also. And that filters right through into research organizations that are taking that data in. So that's it. We got to be careful.
Thank you. A quick pause. Again, we're going to call for poll question number 2. This is for our audience up on the screen now. In your opinion, how effective are the current cybersecurity policies and strategies in protecting U.S. government infrastructure? So please take a moment to respond to that. Now, Yusuf, for this next question, I'd love to start with you, which is, in what ways can AI and machine learning be strategically integrated to enhance threat detection and response capabilities in the defense of government infrastructures?
Sure. So AI is here to stay, right? So I know that there's pushback within certain sectors, but it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. Embrace it and go on. But to answer your question, right, artificial intelligence and machine learning, right, can be integrated to analyze patterns of network traffic to detect anomalies that are or potential threats. Technologies using AI can enhance predictive capabilities as far as security operation centers, so they're not spending time and resources manually scrolling through events. They can even automate response to standard attack scenarios and types. They can help prioritize some threats based on potential impact. And most importantly, right, and this is, we're always going to go back to this, right? AI solutions and machine learning can help reduce the response time and free up critical human resources to tackle more cybersecurity challenges. Now, with that being said, we have to be very careful when it comes to adopting or purchasing these AI companies or powered by AI products. It's the latest and the greatest as far as technology. So everyone is focused on speed to market. Right? How can I get my product and application out to the market and in consumers' hands as fast as possible before my competitors, and probably not as focused on security. These AI solutions are just applications, right? They're code-based. They could have vulnerabilities. So before adopting any of these, two key things to focus on, right? Are they vulnerability free or as vulnerability free as they could be? And what do they do with my data? Is it being used to retrain these models? Right? These are two key items I mentioned over and over. These are the most important takeaways, if anything, from me today.
Thank you, Yusuf. Would anybody else from the panel like to weigh in on that question? I know Yusuf did a great job responding, but we have time for one more response. And if not, we can just move on.
Okay.
Go ahead, Paul.
Sure. I got quite a spectrum of things about AI, and one is that in some ways it's not that new, right? In some of the tooling that we've used, I'm sure that my heuristic antivirus has been using some form of AI and machine learning for a long time, right? I think what took off AI in the public zeitgeist is things like ChatGPT, right? That now, my kids and all these consumers were like, oh, there's this thing you can do with that, and it's AI and this and that. But the whole idea of artificial intelligence within cyber tooling has been there for a while. All our threat intel types of analyses use some of that, but we can certainly take to the next level. I think that's what Yusuf was talking about, to help relieve some of the rote burden on our workforce, right? Of looking at streams of data. How can we help relieve them of some of that work, move them to higher value work so that they can address things, let automated response and technologies take care of some of that. That goes back to budget and resources, right? I don't have all the resources to have 100 people looking at screens. I need technology to help me with that, and have my limited number of people do the things that human beings need to do. I think the other thing you mentioned was sort of or this goes back to what Tom said about data poisoning, right? Or the integrity of the data. I think we all should have somewhat a big concern about these large language models and other things of where AI is taking data from. It's garbage in, garbage out. And if our adversary can poison that data well, we're going to start getting the wrong information back out from our artificial intelligence. It's going to say day is night, night is day, black is white, white is black. And are we going to just take that and say, oh, well, that must be what it says because the AI said so? That was it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else, or should I call for a third poll question? Okay, then. Third poll question. This is the last one until the very end, so stick around to respond to the fourth one after this. But what role do you believe emerging technologies in AI and ML should play in the future of cybersecurity for government infrastructures? So please take a moment to respond to that. And I'm going to go off script for a little bit because we had a Q&A come in from one of our audience members. So this is to anyone on the panel. If someone could further address prioritizing workforce change management federal funding, including getting staff buy-in, reskilling, upskilling, how that plays into infrastructure governance as people tend to naturally and recklessly resist change. Jennifer, I saw your hand up first.
Thank you. I was waiting to get to this question. I'm glad to see that we pivoted. This is an important question, and I'm thankful for whomever asked it. So we talked a little bit about the prioritization of the budgeting for IT and cyber, and this is a critical conversation that we have year in and year out. And we're in April going into we're in May now of the fiscal year, and at this point, all of your IT and cyber departments have pretty much discussed the budgeting for fiscal year 25, and also started to plan, if not finalize, some plans for 26. But that also means a lot of our prioritizations don't include new cyber vulnerabilities, new ransomware attacks, new incidents that could be on the horizon. Yes, we like to plan for emerging technologies and how to implement, conduct the configurations and the maintenance of such things, but it's very hard sometimes with very limited budgets to prioritize the what ifs. So what is very helpful, what I found in my role and then in working across the federal agencies, is making sure that we are knowledgeable of having different partners at the seat for the entire life cycle of this conversation. You need to have your executives, not just the executives that are in the IT and cyber area, but those that make the operational decisions, the administrative, the financials. You even need to have the legal at the table so that they can understand some of the legal implications that could happen if we are not prioritizing and budgeting correctly in the event something could happen. So we need to have all of the key players here to really understand the root of how these things could impact the mission. Everything always goes back to the criticality of the mission. And again, all of our missions are very different. So once you start getting the buy-in at the executive and the leadership level, the communication of what that looks like then needs to filter out through all of the other leadership and staff level chains of your organization. It's very critical to be transparent about the changes that could be on the horizon and how those changes are going to impact the day-to-day operational capacity of that employee's of duties. And with that, I think it's helpful when you start to be transparent and you start to be transparent earlier on, that you kind of ease people into that buy-in. Change is hard. Change is not, something that we just jump up and down and say, okay, yes, sign me up. But when people start to see it progressively, we have to do this because, and they understand the what, the why, the when, and the impact, they're a little bit less abrasive to understand why this change is occurring. So having those conversations earlier on, being transparent, will be helpful for them to understand where we're going. And then perhaps you'll get some of those staff that are already doing some of their current roles to understand, hey, I may need to be helpful in learning a new skill to help my agency move forward into this next area, whether it's a technology area, whether it's an operational capacity, whether it's a leadership role, whatever that may be, that conversation starts to happen so that you can perhaps try to resist some of that change.
Well said. Does anyone want to follow up? Yes, Bo.
Yeah, well said, Jennifer, for sure. I think that, for me, like as a CISO, I'm very aware that we need to grow the ranks and create more cyber practitioners. The need is desperate. And as I read the question from the audience member, I also see a thread of human behavior, social psychology in that, right? People are simply built that way. One of the things that I've done, as I've kind of gone through the ranks is gotten myself more in tune with how people operate, right? Personality types and so forth, to really try to maximize interactions and collaboration with people. I think it's critical to have those interpersonal skills and to really focus on those. One of the authors that I found that I really like is Simon Sinek. Many of us have probably read his books. He wrote Winners Eat Last, Start With Why, books like that about business and productivity and things like that. And so one of the things that he says, there's a lot of YouTube videos on it. He explains how people work in a business context. He talks about the bell curve of adoption of technology. It's got the innovators, it's got the early adapters, the early majority, the late majority, and the laggards, right? That bell curve, most of us have probably seen that. One of the things he says to do to drive change, especially cultural change, is focus on the innovators and the early adapters. That's only about 15% of any organization, so a very small group. And one of the things, and there's more to it than that. He kind of goes through the whole strategy, but one of the things that he says is that he intentionally tries to identify folks who are those early adapters based on personality type. And that helps him sort of work through some of those things. Once you get the early adapters on board, then the early majority is more eager to follow that. And then you drive the change that way. So again, all it is personality plays a role, and you have to consider that too. And it's very sophisticated because you're talking about people, and people are endlessly complex.
100%. Any other comments here before we go into our round of key takeaways from the discussion today? All right, so Tom, I'd love to start with you. Each of you have about 2 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes or so. Just share with me what it is you think was your greatest key takeaway from this conversation that you want our audience to go home with today. So Tom, if we could start with you, please.
Of course. Clearly, we need more critical thinking in our workforce. I remember there was a piece of legislation that was signed by Obama on, I think it was the PMIAA, where that became one of the characteristics they were looking for. And the other is to formulate and develop strong relationships with industry, between the government and industry, especially the technologists. There are vendors out there. In fact, all of the vendors that I have met and built relationships with are very open, and they really want to make a difference. They also understand the government better than we believe they do, and they're trying to help. So it's really good to understand where technology is going and follow it and try to adopt it. Okay, that will fix a lot of problems.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
And Yusuf, if we could go to you next, please.
Sure, certainly. We're never going to have enough workforce in the government, period, right? So leveraging tools, technology is key here. Automate as many tasks as you can humanly do, and have your few cybersecurity subject matter experts focus on more important things. Like Tom just said, collaboration with industry. Tom said that they know government more than we think they do. That's true, because they hire government folks, then put them to interface back with government agencies. So they know exactly what you're going through. They know the challenges. They know how to help. One last thing, there are a lot of innovators out there, a lot of smart folks that develop new applications. I would like to see government agencies become design partners to some of these young startups. Have them solve your issues. They would love to. If they can create a solution that you can use, and then they can turn around and sell it to other agencies, they will do that all day long. So talk to the industry. There are a lot of smart folks ready to help, not just sell, but help. They believe in the mission. They're here to help the American people. So let's take advantage of that as much as we can.
Thank you. And Jennifer, what is your key takeaway?
So I like both of the key takeaways shared thus far. To add on to what they've already shared, I think we have to look at, someone already said AI is here, right? And one of my things is always saying yes, but, so I'll explain that. So I'm not really an AI enthusiast. As a cybersecurity professional, as well as one that also works in privacy and data protection, I have to be cognizant of embracing AI. It's here to stay, yes, but we have to be aware of some of the potential threats and vulnerabilities that could take place to our various infrastructures with the deployment of the various AI tools and technologies. For the last 20 years or so, GAO has been doing work in this federal cybersecurity space, where we have many recommendations, thousands of recommendations to agencies about increasing the protections in their various infrastructures to bolster cyber protections. And to this day, we still have hundreds of recommendations open where federal agencies are struggling to protect their general information systems. We have almost 100 recommendations open for federal agencies alone just for privacy related matters. And with that, now we're introducing additional vulnerabilities with new emerging technologies. And they're going to be fast, they're going to be neat, they're going to be fun, they're going to be innovative, and they're going to be creative. And all of these things, because they're going to create great automation, like Yusuf was saying, for our organizations. And we need that because we don't have enough staffing capabilities, but we can't be naive to the risk-based approaches that we have to take, making sure that we still have human decision-making, that is going to help us in managing some of the complexities. Paul mentioned earlier the garbage in, garbage out. We have to make sure that some of the decision-making that is going in, and we're managing some of the controls around the tools and technologies and the machine learning aspect of the codes that are going into the algorithms are not compromised. Because if they are, we are going to have that garbage out, those issues in those situations. So we really just need to make sure that we're taking into account all of the uses and the situations that could impact our various organizations. And then, of course, at some point, yes, roll out the policies and procedures, roll out the user awareness training, and make sure that people understand what's in it for them to really receive that buy-in.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Bo, let's hear from you on your key takeaway.
To me, I just want to emphasize that cybersecurity is hard. And it's hard on the day when everything works perfectly, right? It's especially hard on the day when things break down and they don't work perfectly. And so we have to help each other. And I think Paul mentioned it's a team sport. It definitely is a team sport. I'm grateful that CISA is leading this space, and I've seen the maturity that CISA has gained over the years. And it's impressive that they're really doing what we need as a federal government. They're leading, and that I'm grateful for that. I'm also grateful for organizations that nurture this public and private partnership, because federal agencies need the help. We're desperate for the help. We need the help. We need the expertise. We need the guidance, and we need the support to make this work and to really achieve the important work that each of us have. So collaboration partnerships are absolutely critical to our way forward, and learning too, right? Learning from each other as well. So I'll just leave you with that.
Thank you. And Paul, we'll end with your key takeaway.
It's always great to be the last one with the key takeaways, because people take all the good. But my takeaway, and I've had this with other panels I've been on, is what encourages me about the present and in the future for cybersecurity, not only in the federal government but elsewhere, is the knowledge, talent, and passion that people have, as represented by the panelists today. I mean, what great insights and ideas, and again, passion for this, that these, and we're representative of hundreds of other people in the federal space, as well as in the private partnerships who are doing this, right? And we've got a lot of passion for it. I think 80–90%, we're thinking in the same way too. These things are important. These are the risks and threats that we have, and these are the ways we can go about it. And we can share ideas about the other things. But that's my takeaway. And again, it's not a unique takeaway maybe with this panel, but whenever I'm on one, I'm like, wow, I am in the presence of some really smart people, and I'm encouraged then, like I say, about the present and future of cybersecurity.
Thank you. I agree. There was a lot of really great things said today. And I want to thank you all, the panelists, for participating, as well as the folks at home for writing in and listening and being such an interactive audience. Also want to give a special shout out to Lisa Ragusa Fidela again and her team for making today's event possible. So I think I mentioned before, we have a fourth and final poll question, which is up on the screen. You just need to let us know if you'd like to receive your CPE credit for being here today. And otherwise, we will see you at the next event. I think that'll be up here on the screen shortly, but you can go register on our website for that one. And we're looking forward to seeing you at the next one. Hope everyone has a great rest of their week.